So welcome back. We're going to talk about a new work of ours called Witness Stand, which we've been doing now for nearly a year. And it started off with this, actually just a kind of a vision, an idea that this stand, this audience stand, a tier like you have anywhere at the sports or event of any kind, but it's out in the intertidal zone and periodically getting flooded, and so the audience is stranded out there. And this is the kind of idea for placing an audience in a particular orientation in a particular site, and then listening to works that are related to that site, but also integrated with the sound of the site itself. So sympathetic and in some sort of dialogue, in a sense, with that sound.
And I just want to say something about that persistent image.
Yeah.
You know, when you're making something and you don't know what you're making yet, and you have like one insight into it, or something that stays with you that you need to keep paying attention to see what happens with that. That's what that image was. Actually, we've had that image in our head for about 4 years. So, and I want to say that because it was pre-pandemic times. So this started to make sense as a work during this COVID time. You know, like any work is about invitation and trust and relationship. So the Perth Festival in Australia had presented our work before, 5 Short Blasts, and we had a strong connection, and they invited us to make new work with them, and we said, well, we've got this image, and we've got a sense about what it could be. Could this be the thing that we develop together?
And they said yes.
They said yes.
Well, not entirely yes, because fundamental to conceiving of works related to site, in our view, and I think in a lot of people's view these days, is that you need to engage with the peoples whose land it is, the First Nations people, the country. And Perth Festival had a process then where we would present this concept, this idea of the witness stand, to the Noongar Advisory Board for the festival. And they grilled us hard about, well, why do you folk want to come over here and do a piece of work over here on our land? And why did we?
Yeah, why didn't we? I mean, that's the question we ask ourselves. Like, we don't want to take things to where they don't need to be. This is a very clear thing for us. However, we must have answered okay, because Kylie Bracknell, who's an amazing Noongar artist, came back to us and said, yes, the festival will take this work on. We would like to make it a collaboration of four parts, 4 ways, with Kylie and Barry Maguire, who's a Noongar elder. And so the 4 of us made this work happen. And the process in which it happened was all remote, in that we were in our little 5K in Northcote, and we had conversation after conversation with Barry and Kylie. We had a sense that these stands needed to be in a place of some sort of contestation, like in that image, like that some sort of transitional zone, something was happening there, something precarious, something transparent. And when we discussed that idea with Barry, he said around a cultural vibration. That's how that made sense to him. And so Barry in collaboration with Kylie and the Noongar community, chose the 7 different sites where the stands would be, and thinking about what stories Barry could share around those sites, that was the right time for them to share those stories. And so we invited a whole incredible collection of artists, Perth-based artists, musicians, sound artists, big range of ages, big range of genres, into this process with Barry, and they were part of all the site visits where Barry spoke at each of these sites. And then that material and their responses we all built together into sound works that audiences would listen to at these different sites over a month of the festival.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the materials were recorded during those site visits. Ambient soundscape kinds of recordings, as well as what Barry said, and he's an extraordinarily eloquent person who with a great delivery, so he sort of made for really good listening actually, and surprising unfolding of material. So, and which actually his way of delivery was extraordinarily compositional. I think if we sort of go back to that sort of funny way of thinking about things, where he would give a clue as to something that he might be talking about, and then sometime later you would get a return, a reprise of, and then it would be expanded on, and there were repetitions of things which you think, oh, he's saying the same thing again, but then actually without the repetition it doesn't make proper sense, you know. So, and those kind of principles were really exciting to discover actually in that process, and really helped in shaping these sort of hour-long sound pieces, which incorporated Barry's words, which incorporated 3 usually different compositions from different pieces from different artists from Perth. Yeah.
And Barry jumped between Noongar and English.
He did.
And that was also, there's this spaciousness about moving between language that feels very connected to the form of what we were trying to do around dissolving unnecessary genre subdivisions, dissolving unnecessary ways of thinking about making. The ways that we decided about what time of day those works might happen were in collaboration with Barry and Kylie and the site itself. So sometimes they were at 6 a.m. or 7:30 out on Wajima, Rottnest Island. There was a particular time in the evening, which was actually also to do with the ferry, and thinking about sunset and thinking about the very big stories actually of that place that Barry felt that it was time to share. And so the way that was held, that needed to be held very carefully. There were different, all sorts of sets of different vibrations, I guess, we set in play over that period of time. And some audience members went to all of them. Some people went to one. Some people went to a couple. Some people went to the same one again. So there's a sort of whole different set of ways that audience could be part of that time. And then Witness Stand.
Yeah.
We got to do it in Riga.
We did.
So, I want to say that we've never experienced this work.
No.
We haven't sat in a stand with an audience. So that whole process across this country was facilitated incredibly by our producer, Kat Wilkinson, and she Zoomed us in, she dialed us in, we had live stream experience of the shows, we talked to so many artists and people around it. We felt as if we were there and we were still in our lounge room in Northcote.
I also think that kind of heightened documentation of process fed the work itself. It wasn't sort of just for our benefit, or it wasn't just to facilitate that we could know what was going on. It was actually material to what ended up being, I think, because we weren't there, the experience of the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And now another thing I want to say about this is that it doesn't exist on the internet. None of these works, the works don't exist as a documentation. They only existed, they're a time-based thing. And so people listened in physical space to these things.
But they were facilitated by the internet.
That's right.
So it's it's not going up onto YouTube or anything like that.
Hybridity.
There's a hybridity about it, which is in a different way.
Yeah.
Then we went to Riga.
So Riga.
We didn't go to Riga.
We did not go to Riga. Work happened in Riga. Art was made in Riga. And in Riga it was the Homo Novus Festival, which is like a contemporary live art festival. It's an incredibly contemporary festival engaged with its city, engaged with its community. Latvia has a incredible musical and poetic history and culture, which is vibrant and aware of its past and totally future focused as well. So we worked with the festival, and a key person at the festival, Santa Romero, who we ended up calling our city dramaturg, to decide where these sites would be. What makes sense for this work? What needs to be witnessed in Riga at this time? So with Santa, it's almost like Santa gave us a history lesson in the history of Riga.
That's right.
Yeah, but
it was also a history lesson for her.
Yeah.
No, it was a research, and that sort of fed into who to ask. You know, what the commissioning parameters were.
What current tensions were? What current things were vibrating in that city that we could bring some gentle attention to, and that artists might respond to, and that artists in that city, because of that really strong history of live music and poetry, it made sense to invite poets and musicians, live musicians, at each site.
They have a national holiday for this poet Raunis, I think.
Yeah.
And a whole week of poetic celebration. Yeah. Which, you know, you don't think of that happening in this country, really, do you? Anyway.
So it's like, of course, it made sense to have live musicians and poets at each stand. So there we go. So that's sort of that new form in that place.
Yeah.
And then together with Santa, choosing these different sites, like, for example, the jamming towers.
Yeah, which were the Soviet, as they say, the jamming towers, jamming the radio signals coming out of the West at different times. And actually there was a complexity to that which we didn't realise. We used to sort of think, oh, they jam the signal and you can't hear anything. But actually there's certain times when they did it, there's certain things got through. There was a very interesting sonic result of the jamming, where you get these strangely distorted little bits, passages of music and broadcasting. And so the artists there really went into that, used some of the old equipment that we used in those days, and made a sound work at the site of the old jamming towers, which was sort of sandwiched on this little bit of triangle of land with apartment blocks all around. And all the people in the apartments came out and listened to the work, as well as the people who are actually on the stand. So one of the things about Witness Stand, I think, is the site of the stand and the people on it listening for someone who's just going past. Yeah. So that's often a thing for us, that there is a
incidental
audience and a performative element to the whole thing. So you don't just think, oh, that's the performance, that's the music. It's actually, the whole thing is a performance in itself.
Yeah. And because of this one having live musicians, so, you know, normally we look at live musicians, don't we? Like, you know, we face, here's an audience looking at the musician performing like this. But because we knew that this form of witnessing is about witnessing out and witnessing 360 and being in with the context and the ecology of that place, then we said, oh no, like the musicians are either under the stand or they're in the stand. So we're like together. There's this withness rather than an opposition like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that sort of comes back to that thing about like what's persistent in an idea, what's flexible in an idea, what needs to maintain, what would we never let go of, you know. And that's just an ongoing set of learning and testing, really.
I mean, one musician ended up playing in the back of a van because it was raining.
Yeah.
Because she had a harpsichord which could be damaged very easily by a little bit of rain. So.
Yeah. And the van was backed into the back, under the witness stand.
Yeah. Yeah. And then different artists interpreted that thing of being with the audience. In some cases, they asked the audience to actually contribute and make the piece. Other ones, they were just sitting with them, you know, and looking out. And another thing that happened was the national TV got involved in broadcasting the whole thing, and they got into the idea that they were doing a live broadcast and taking the cue from what the sound world was of the pieces. And so we had this beautiful live video piece, actually, which, you know, panned across and zoomed in on people. And so
from the perspective of the stand.
Yeah, from the perspective of the stand.
Yeah.
So that was a surprising and thrilling kind of bonus.
Yeah, and that was a way we could participate as well. That was a way we could see that, which sort of connects to what you were saying about the documentation in Perth, that sharing. What happened in Riga was a little bit different, and in that it was broadcast to a wider public like that, but it was all about what the audience on the stand was seeing and going out. So we did have that expansive thing, and then that does stay there on the internet.
Yes.
You know, that exists there, so that was a different...
And it also reminds me of some of the things we're starting to do with some new works in collecting, if you like, artefacts of process and placing them back into the eventual, whatever the installed period or the performance period or the performance event ends up being. So, yeah, sort of.
Yeah, maybe that's where that came from. Who knows?
So that's witness stand.
Yeah. So witness stand is teaching us things like we haven't sat in a stand.
No.
And I think there's knowledge that we gain from when we're within our work, you know, as artists. When you sit within something and you sit with an audience, there's an embodied knowledge where you're breathing at the same time that we haven't got yet. I don't know, will we ever get it, Timmy? I mean, we're in the process of making a new one now for a festival in the UK for next year. And it's still TBC about whether we will experience that one. Maybe this work is something that we never experienced. There's an interesting thing, I reckon, about a freedom for the artists who are there, the team of that place who are making that. I think there's a sort of freedom for them if we're not there. Yeah. Like, of course, they're like trust and responsibility and they're sharing things with us, but we're not there. So there's this sort of like beautiful taking on, they really respectfully take on the idea and bring it, and it becomes their own. And I mean, I think maybe that's, maybe we're never going to see it.
There's some sort of dissolving of the sort of individuality of an artist or a musician that I think we kind of like. You know, you get your name in the biggest print type or something.
Yeah.
Maybe that doesn't need to happen anymore.
Yeah. I mean, all these things are about dispersed authorship. So is it that it's so dispersed that, you know, what do we just have little touch points on, and how that form still resonates and makes propositions that we feel connected to. Yeah, don't know yet.